everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Door to Door. I'm Virginia Stanley, joined with Chris Connolly and Lainey Mays, and we are thrilled, over the moon, to bring you the one and only, the fabulous Anthony Horowitz. Thank you so much for joining us, Anthony. Is he moving? He'll move soon. He's just lacking fluidity right now.
Yes, Anthony is joining us from across the pond, so sometimes the internet signal takes a moment to catch on. Anthony, if you're with us and you can hear us, give us a sign. Viewers, thank you for waiting with us. Of course, if there's anyone who was ever worth the wait, it is Anthony Horowitz.
There he is. Hello.
We're up to a tough start. You just introduced me, and at that moment, immediately I heard a boing and the internet went off. Isn't Zoom is so wonderful when Zoom works, and when it doesn't, it is such a beast.
It's a beast.
However, we're back together again.
We are, and we are so thrilled that you're here with us. We know that you have been doing, your days have been very busy, and the weather is crazy, and Zoom is nutty, and we're all together, and that's what matters. So
it's lovely to be talking to you, Virginia. It's a real pleasure.
Well, the pleasure is mine and Chris's and Lainey's. I speak for all of us when I say thank you, and we're just going to jump right in. So, folks, look, you know who Anthony Horowitz is. He is the New York Times bestselling author of Magpie Murders. This is the follow-up to the bestselling, wildly popular Magpie Murders, again featuring the now retired editor hero Susan Ryland solving another murder. Now, Magpie Murders had made it onto the Library Reads list, as did his, hold on, I got it. Oh my goodness, I've lost the word is murder. And now that puts Anthony into the Hall of Fame because Moonflower Murders has made it into the Library Reads list. And so we are just over the moon for you. These books are captivating, compelling, page turning, and people just have fallen in love with your writing. So we have lots of questions that we want to ask and librarians want to ask. So we're going to get to all of it, and we're going to start right now. So Chris, tossing it over to you right now.
Okay, well, Anthony, again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's strange and wonderful to be talking to one of my favorite mystery authors, living or not living, just in general. And I just want to first just ask you to give...
I'm still living, Chris.
Yes, you are. We were worried at the top of the episode, but here we are, and we are so happy. Could you just give viewers an introduction into the book, and then, of course, the series, and why maybe you decided to return to Atticus Pond and Susan Ryland?
Sure. Well, that's a big question. I could talk for a long time to answer it. When I wrote Magpie Murders, which was about 4 years ago now, I think, I always thought it was a one-off. It was an idea I'd had a long time ago, this idea about writing about a murder mystery writer and having a book in a book, two books together, a modern mystery with a golden age detective story buried in its heart. And the result of that was Magpie Murders, which did extremely well, both in England, in America. In fact, pretty much all around the world, it did very well. And my publishers then began to put pressure on me to come up with a sequel. But more than that, we've sold the television rights, and there's going to be a TV version. Our Masterpiece Theatre, PBS, is doing it in America. We start shooting in, I think, February of next year. And the producers said, look, it's great to be doing a TV show, but we need a sequel because, TV is all about seasons. Now, I don't write to order. I only write what I want to write. I only write if it's a good idea. And I began to think, could I play the same tricks that I played in Magpie Murders, the book within a book, the golden age versus the modern mystery, Atticus Punt, Susan Ryland, all these characters I invented, could I do it a second time? And I thought about it for, I guess, a couple of months. And I suddenly had an idea, I can do it. I can play the same game, but in a different way. And so then I said yes, and the book that followed was Moonflower Murders.
Excellent. And I love the classic mystery because there's a timelessness to it. And of course, some writers approach their characters and they don't age. They're almost stuck in time. But you're writing with modern day sensibilities. What's it like doing that and like approaching an Agatha Christie-esque story through a modern gaze?
Well, Chris, I have written Ian Fleming books and I've written Sherlock Holmes books. And when I write those books, in order to get the voice right and to get the period right, I have to sort of immerse myself in them. I have to forget the 21st century. You know, I write with a fountain pen anyway. Here it is. And I have to sort of just forget about technology, forget about politics, forget about my family, and just live the life of a novel. And that is how I do it with these books too. But when it comes to writing the book inside the book written by Alan Conway, which has as its detective this strange German Greek Jew who is in the Second World War, who has been in a labor camp, who has seen evil at close quarters. When I write those books, I have to live inside them and just immerse myself into that world, the language of it, the gentility of it, the elegance of it. And above all, Chris, the most important thing for me, the slow pace of it. We live in a world where information, any information, is available in 5 seconds. Tap it into the keyboard and you're an expert. I love writing about a world where you have to think, where you have to ask questions, where you have to wait for an answer, where everything unfolds itself to you slowly. And that therefore is the attitude change that I have to make. It's slowing down. That's a sort of half answer to an interesting and a bigger question, but that's sort of the procedure.
That's excellent. And that's fantastic news about the TV adaptation, which is a nice segue into my next question. You've written extensively for film, television, and of course, as a novelist. How do you navigate those different mediums? And what are your feelings on working in those separately?
Well, first of all, I love all the writing I do. I love writing. I mean, it is a great passion of my life, the joy of my life. I've often said I only really feel alive and complete when I have a pen in my hand and when I'm scribbling on a piece of paper. So whether I'm writing adult, I write with that absolute passion for what I'm doing, and I just love doing it. Now, obviously, adapting is a peculiar exercise. Adapting Magpie Murders was phenomenally difficult, partly because you know, it's 2 books. And so Susan Ryland, the hero of Magpie Murders, would only appear for the first time in episode 4 of the show, because the first that couldn't be a beginning. So when I came to adapt that book, Magpie Murders, I had to start thinking about how could I tell this story through Susan, not through Atticus, not through any of the other characters, but keep Susan, who's incidentally a wonderful piece of casting. Not allowed to say who it is, but we have a fantastic actor who has agreed to take the part. How can I make that person the star of the show? And that required a lot of thinking. It wasn't easy. It took me months and months and months and many attempts before I got it right. But when I did, I was very happy with the result. And people who've read Magpie Murders, I think are going to be in for a surprise. The show is very different from the book, but nonetheless keeps, I hope, all the best things that are in it.
So if you don't mind welcoming us further into your mind and how you write, how do you structure this out? What's your process for writing a book within a book? And was it the same when you're doing a sequel?
These books are
Chris?
Yeah. Oh, and I'm sorry, Anthony. It does seem like you're breaking up a little.
Chris?
Yes.
Would it help? Lainey and I
I'm back, I think.
Okay, hang on one second, Anthony, because we want to make sure we're going to do everything we can to make this.
If I stick my...
Chris, would it help
then you can't see me. That
off?
doesn't help at all.
But if I got off, like
I don't think that will impact things. Anthony, if you don't mind trying this, would you try rejoining the Zoom meeting? Would you mind trying
to come out and come back in again?
Yeah, just come out. Yeah, that'd be great.
Right.
All right, thank you, and thank you, viewers.
I hope I get to see you again soon.
You will. Thank you.
So Lainey can come back on because apparently it doesn't make a difference.
It doesn't really impact. It's more an issue, I think, of just steady internet for Anthony. So, okay. But I think, yeah, sometimes exiting and entering is the medicine we need. Let's see.
Okay, let's hope a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Hello.
Hello again, everybody. How nice to see you again.
How have you been?
I will try and answer the last. I've been very well since we last spoke. What was the question you asked me, Chris? Just remind me.
Oh, that's a great question.
What was the question?
The question was, how do you plot this out, and was your process different?
I was answering, but these books are very complicated to write, but they mustn't be complicated to read. I think of them a little bit like a watch. That a watch, if you take it to pieces, is massively complicated. It has springs and dials and cogs and wheels and diamonds and goodness knows what else are in there. But telling the time is instant and fast. That's what the book should be like as well. And so what I do is I tend to start thinking very early on about the structure, about the contents. I have notebooks. This is one of my notebooks. I don't know what's in it, but let me see if I can find even one of these books. These are the notes for Magpie Murders. I don't know if you can see, but all those pages there are simply notes for Magpie Murders and endless diagrams and questions and there Alan Conway, there he is, and questions about him and what he's doing and then more characters building up. And this is all Magpie Murders, not our Moonflower Murders. Who stole the money? You know, that's a question to ask myself, and that's the thing. So it's a question of building it up piece by piece. So when I start writing, I know pretty much 80% of what is going to be in the book, at least. I need to know everything. Obviously, I'm going to go back over it. I'm going to seed more clues in. But that structuring process is, to me, the most important part. But in terms of where I begin in the story of the book, in Moonflower Murders, I began in the modern world. Why? Because that's where the book begins. I like to follow the book through. I don't like to begin in the middle of a book and work my way back. The book begins in 2016, 17. I'm not even sure what the year of it is, but sort of now-ish, with Susan in Greece. And then I cut back into the world of the Golden Age story. But in terms of my narrative line, Alan Conway visits a hotel in London. That's what happens. A writer comes to a hotel in England where there has been a murder. He meets various characters in the hotel, the managers, the receptionist, other people there. And he learns that one of them committed this murder. And for reasons that don't become clear at first, he hides their identity, the identity of the killer, in his book. So what I did was I went with Alan to the hotel. I met those people. I examined the crime that Alan examined, the murder of the murder of an advertising executive on the night of a wedding. A guest at the hotel is murdered in a rather horrible way. And then I went into the Golden Age detective story that Alan Conway wrote as a result of all that, with all the characters that he had met in the second book. And that is the fun of it. It is to follow the characters, to keep going forward and not to keep jumping around. I hope that answer makes sense to you, but it's sort of, because sometimes the process is to me quite beguiling and baffling, but it's forward motion is how I would sum it up.
Excellent. Seems very like chicken and egg, what comes first and what. Do you feel like you're writing 3 stories at one time, or does it all just
No. I think I'm writing 2 stories, because there's the old story and there's the modern story. And I am sort of not really writing them at the same time. I'm writing them one after the other consecutively. I just want to keep hold of my sanity. And I want the most important thing for me is that a book, especially a complicated double murder mystery like this one, with 2 sets of murders, 2 sets of clues, and 2 solutions, has got to be a pleasure to read. I do not want somebody stopping on page 248 and saying, who is this character? Where has he come from? What is his name? What is he doing? Who is he related to? Why is he in this story? I want my reader to know at every moment of the book exactly what is going on. But truth of the matter is, I'm not that smart myself, and I sometimes get very, very confused by murder mysteries that leave me behind, and I don't want to do that to my readers.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Can you talk a little bit about the research that went into the writing of this book? And
these books require less research than many of my books, because I am very well acquainted with the Golden Age detective stories of Dorothy L. Sayers, Agatha Christie, obviously Ellery Queen, Ngaio Marsh, Josephine Tay, all these different writers whom I've read as growing up and such. So I'm very well acquainted with their world. Sometimes I do a little bit of research. I'll give you a very good example. I was researching the death of the actress in Moonflower Murders. I'm not giving anything away because it's quite clear that she's going to get killed, and she is killed. And I came upon something when I was examining the research into what happens when a person is killed in this way that made me go, wow, I can use that. That's amazing. I didn't know that was the case. And then that led me to think about other works of writing that have similar things in them. And so the great thing about research is not that it locks you down to a fact or to a piece of information that you can use. Research, I think, used best, opens you up. It tells you things you didn't know. And it's the things you didn't know that make the book exciting. So that's why I love research.
Exciting for the reader and exciting for you, I would imagine.
I think that if writing isn't exciting for the writer, it won't be exciting for the reader either. I think that the telepathy between a writer and a reader should always be in tune with each other. I like to think that when I write one of my books, if you read one of them, I'm in your head. I mean, that may not be a thought you wish to have at the moment, but nonetheless, I think it is true. It is a sort of telepathy going on. If I'm surprised, you'll be surprised. And it goes contrary to that. And I always say this to young people when I visit schools. If you write, teacher tells you to write a story and you're a bit bored and don't want to do it, the teacher will be bored and won't want to read it. You've got to find somehow the energy inside you to write the story.
Now you just froze on that, and I was really interested. So can you say
you've got to find the energy inside you to write the story. If a teacher tells you to write something and you're bored and you don't want to write it, when the teacher comes to read it, this is what I say to kids in school, that if you're bored and you don't want to write it, the teacher will be bored and won't want to read it because it communicates itself to you. So, I think that the excitement, the joy, the love, the fun, the passion, fun in particular, a word I use often about writing, and certainly about writing murder mysteries, the fun quota has got to be there. I want people to smile. I think that the other, murder mystery right now has had a sort of a spike. The world has been in such a difficult place for so long. You in America have just been through a very grueling election, and many, many people have been worried about the future of your country. And to that, COVID. In this country, we have Brexit and all that might lead to. We have global warming. I think that right now, people are desperate for books as the great escape. I mean, this is the time when reading comes into its own, where, you can forget everything that is happening in this world around us just by picking up a book.
No truer words were ever spoken, that's for sure. Lainey, did you have a question? I want to get to our librarian questions, but we also had some questions. So you guys, I don't want to step on toes.
Yeah, I do just want to ask, because it is so interesting that you wrote Magpie Murders without the intention of returning to it. So were there any decisions that you made when you first wrote Magpie Murders that when you decided to return to the story, you're like, oh, this made it extra difficult for me? I think of Alan Conway in particular, and were there any hard decisions you had to make?
Well, one of the hardest decisions was I knew that I had to have a book within a book. And Alan Conway, who is the author of of Atticus Punt Takes the Case and all the stories starring Atticus Punt, has actually written about 9 books. Atticus Punt Investigates, No Rest for the Wicked, Atticus Punt Takes the Case, Night Comes Calling, Atticus Punt's Christmas, Gin and Cyanide, Red Roses for Atticus, Atticus Punt Abroad, and Magpie Murders. That's the full canon of Alan Conway's work. And it's listed, here it is, in the book within the book, which even has quotes from other authors about this book. So I wanted to incorporate one of those books into my new book and realized that I'd given away the ending of at least half of them. And that was a real problem. But foolishly, when I wrote Magpie Murders, I told the people who the murderer Red Roses for Atticus. So I couldn't use those books because people already knew the ending. So it was finding a book that fitted into the ideas that I had. And the only one that would work for me was Atticus Punt Takes the Case. I can't explain quite why, because I don't want to spoil the ending, but that's the only book that worked.
I love that you have blurbs for those.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I said I love that you have blurbs for Atticus.
Well, I have everything. I have blurbs. I have reviews from. It's rather funny actually, because in this book, I wrote a fake quote for it, which is from Peter James. Peter James is a thriller writer and a very good friend of mine, and he wrote, "I love a whodunit with a real sucker punch, and boy, this absolutely delivers. I can't wait for the next one." So that's what I wrote as Peter. Last week, the Wall Street Journal ran a review of Moonflower Murders, and they quoted that quote. So I have this view that in the next, it sounds crazy, and it may sound a little bit conceited. I apologize if it does, but when the paperback comes out, the soft cover, I'm sure my publishers will put that quote on the back now, written by me, but quoting the Wall Street Journal. That's never happened before. A writer writing his own review and actually having it appear in print. There it is. There it is. You've got it.
You've got all your reviews.
It made me laugh when I saw it.
That's pretty funny. That's pretty
Not
funny.
all of them. I think the publishers only send me the good ones.
All right, I'm going to start looking at questions. Chris, Lainey, you guys keep asking your questions while I go through the librarian questions.
Speaking of librarians, I don't know if you remember, you did a video for us. I think it's probably a few years back now, but we showed it at an event and you just spoke so wonderfully about libraries and the difference between libraries in the UK and here. And I just found it so fascinating. So, I mean, not really a question. I just wanted to say how big of a supporter you are.
Let me tell you straight off, as you know very well, librarians are my favorite people in the whole world. And the value of librarians is phenomenal. I mean, librarians were the saving of my life, frankly, because I'm not sure if on the video I was talking about this, but when I was a kid in a very, very nasty school in North London, a boarding school, a place, this is back in the 60s, a lot of brutality, beatings and bullying and an atmosphere of oppression. I was a slightly fat little kid. I was a very thick and backward little kid, and I didn't have many friends. And the one safe space in the school, the one place I felt any sort of happiness or comfort was the library. And the only friend I had in the school was the librarian who introduced me to books and began to feed my interest in trying to not just read comic books and sort of silly books, which is where I began, but to start to get me to read better and better books. And that followed into secondary school, 13 to 18, where I was much happier, but nonetheless, the library, the school library, I still remember hours spent there. And libraries have played a huge part in my life. I mean, you know, I love buying books, but I also love borrowing books. And especially when you're researching, you know, so I think Virginia was asking me about research earlier, that when I was writing Foyle's War, I would read every season 15 or 20 books. I couldn't even afford to buy them all, but the local library down the road here, I must be honest and say it happens to be the British Library, which is an amazing library, but that's where I spent our libraries is inconceivable. I don't know if it's happening in America, but here in England, libraries are being shut down. The government is saving money. And I may have said this also, you may have heard me say this, in this country, my country, the United Kingdom, it is every prison in this country has to have a library and a librarian. That's the law, but not every school. Schools do not by law have to have a full-time librarian. And that is crazy. I can't understand it because, I'll stop in a minute, but the library in a school, it's the beating heart of the school. And it doesn't matter whether a kid is interested in history or rocket science or football or flower pressing. It doesn't matter. There will be a book about that subject and not only will that kid find that book, but they'll find connections to every other subject that the school teaches. That is the joy of a library. And so to talk to librarians, it's a pleasure. And you know, I said to you earlier, I fell asleep and nearly missed the session. If I had, I would have been so cross with myself. But I'm here.
I think we all need to dab our eyes very quickly.
I know, no joke. Seriously, you're making us misty-eyed.
Oh, well, look, I'm 65 and I've arrived at certain thoughts and at a certain place in my life. And I'm old enough now to look back at the journey of my life to a large extent. I'm not saying it's over yet, but I have begun to see, you know, libraries, books, reading. It is, I think, you know, if I look at this year, social media has so coarsened the world. I think that what has happened is we've become so angry. We've allowed certain platforms on social media to turn us all into opinionated, black and white, angry people. You don't agree with me, therefore there must be something wrong with you. And that has seeped into politics all over the world, not just in America, sort of name calling and aggression. But if you read fiction, the exact opposite happens. You learn empathy. You learn the gray, that life can be gray as well as black and white. You learn, you know, a bad person in a book is not just a bad person. They are a human being who has somehow turned bad. And you understand them and you know where you've come from. I mean, I look back on my life and I know that I haven't been a perfect human being, and reading and books have often shown me where I've sort of gone wrong. My love of Charles Dickens, for example. I mean, it may sound crazy to learn lessons about yourself from Dickens, but of course, the whole point of great literature is, and I read Dickens over and over and over again, the whole point of great literature is that every time you read it, you learn something new about yourself. So anyway, move on. Questions?
Wow. That's, you know, I swear I'm going to go back through the recording of this fabulous interview. And when I say fabulous interview, basically it's just what anything you're saying is gold. But there are so many wonderful things that you have said about librarians and humanity in general, and just the human spirit.
Well, Virginia, we're talking on a day where I get the feeling that the world has somehow turned a tiny corner. You know, this is the day that a vaccine has possibly been announced for COVID. Obviously, there have been huge shifts in America. And I'm not saying, incidentally, that everybody will be happy with those shifts. I'm perfectly well aware that people listening to this, not everybody agrees in politics. But nonetheless, I still think that a period of intense worry has come to an end. And I think on both sides of the spectrum, people have been worried. I mean, you know, when you've got people with guns in the street, there is worry. And it seems as if we are going to enter a better year next year. For the first time, there is light. And maybe that's what's energizing me now, this sense of, you know, I've been cooped up and scared since February, and now that's over, to an extent. I just hope and pray that I am right, and that, you know, that we're going to get back to how we were, and better, and that we'll have learned what we've come through.
Yeah, and to have and to listen, you know.
Yeah.
I always think everybody talks about how, you know, 2020 is this terrible year, and it is, because of the loss of life. That alone is enough to put this book in a barrel and sink it. But it also gave us a vision, you know. I mean, 2020 vision, and boy, have our eyes all been opened? Is that not?
Well, it'll be interesting to see moving forward if we learn any of the lessons. We, as a race, human beings have a very good way of forgetting everything the moment everything gets back to normal. But just, you know, we are going to have to change our behavior. We sort of are beginning to see that now. And anyway, that's another subject.
All right. Okay. But we should definitely have you back, and we could just, like, you know, let's talk about 2020, and then I don't know.
I would love to sit in a room with you rather than to see 4 postage stamps on the screen of which I'm one.
I know. And if we had cold beer, that'd be even better. Okay. I don't know. All right. I'm going to get to questions from our librarians. We're 25 to 3. And we want to, Chris, Laney, if there's anything else while I scroll away. Kim McGee says, thank you for adding the second book so we could be a junior detective along with Susan.
I hope you don't guess it, is what I will say to you.
Me too. People are so excited to hear you. Let's see. Lillian Dabney wants to know, how does your screenwriting inform your novel writing?
Lillian, it's a very interesting question. And I'm glad you didn't ask me which I prefer, because that's the question I always get asked. The screenwriting informs my writing in this way. It's all about a worry of losing the audience, of keeping people hooked and keeping people involved. When I'm writing a TV screenplay, I'm always aware that of 2 things. One, that the viewer may have other things to do, you know, accounts to file, kids to put to bed, I don't know, gardening, whatever it may be. And therefore, I try very hard with my TV writing to keep saying, watch me, watch me, watch me. And that comes into my books too. You won't ever get to the end of a chapter in one of my books. It doesn't say, read the next chapter, read the next chapter. It's going to get even better. So that's one of the things I've learned. And I think the other thing is that television is a very visual medium. And we have now, you know, when I was a kid, television wasn't so visual. I mean, you know, if there was a spaceship landing, it was probably going to be a plate on the end of a fishing rod, and you know, special effects were not that special, and the world was quite small. Now, television is such a visual medium. So much happens that is powerful and visual. And I believe, and this is why this is where I answer your question. I believe that books should be visual too. That when you read a book, you should not only hear the characters and be in the world, but see it. So particularly with the Alex Rider books, I try to make them very visual. I always remember they're written for a generation that had grown up with images, not words.
I like that. Paulette Brooks says, what other writers have informed your own writing?
Paula, the writers that I most admire, well, some of them are pretty obvious. Ian Fleming, obviously, for Bond, and I've written 2 Bond novels, and I always loved him as a kid. Conan Doyle for Sherlock Holmes. And I've written, you know, I wrote The House of Silk as a Sherlock Holmes novel, and Moriarty. So that's pursuing two great heroes of mine. Agatha Christie, I would have to add to the mix because, you know, for murder mystery, she is still the queen of crime. Stephen King for pace, for just, I think Stephen King is an interesting writer because he is both a very, very great writer. His craftsmanship is admirable. His book on writing is a masterclass in the art that I have pursued all my life. But he's also a very popular writer. And I think it's very interesting that you can write populist, big bestsellers that are going to be on the airport, you know, front of the shelf of the airport, but which still have quality and still have class about them. He is a terrific writer. Don Winslow is a writer I've discovered recently. He's been very active during the election with his extraordinary films he's been making. Yeah. And I had the pleasure to interview him or to do a conversation with him, which is available somewhere on the internet. Many of his books. I've just finished his big collection of short stories, Broken, which are utterly superb. And then of course, all the 19th century masters. You know, I love Dickens and Austen and Hardy and Gissing and Trollope and George Orwell. 19th century writing is a tradition of great language. Shy away from someone like Charles Dickens. Oh my God, these books are so long and they're written in an age where there aren't cars, there are carriages. But you try a book like Great Expectations or David Copperfield, you enter a world that is so brilliantly realized, so perfect, so full of joy that it's a wonderful experience. So that's some of the authors that have inspired me. Oh, I forgot to mention Sarah Waters, who I absolutely adore, one of my favorite writers. I don't know if you know her, The Little Stranger, I read this year. It is a phenomenal book. How to take a ghost story and turn it into something which will just linger in the corner of your mind, not with violence, not with sort of writing. She's quite a Dickensian writer, actually. And her books are just so memorable. Affinity, another book of hers, has one of the most amazing twists you'll ever come upon in literature. And one last mention, a writer I adore, is Kazuo Ishiguro, just for his joy of language, for his perfectly elegant, beautifully written sentences. And the two books of his which I like so much are Never Let Me Go, probably the saddest book I have ever read in my life, and such, and of course Remains of the Day.
Okay.
You shouldn't ask me these questions. I can't stop once I get started.
Speaking of great writers, Janet Lockhart says, what golden age mystery writer do you think is most underappreciated?
Margaret Ellis. She was a contemporary of Dorothy L. Sayers, and I may have got her name wrong. I'm not sure. Do I dare go into the internet to check if I've got that name correct? But I'm pretty sure that's her name. So one of you look her up. See if Margaret Ellis comes up on your screen.
Margaret Ellis? Okay.
Yeah.
Yellow. Okay. And then, of course...
I'll give you another answer. John Franklin Bardin. Bardin. My favorite mystery of all time is called The Deadly Percheron. And on that one, I know I'm correct. The Deadly Percheron is an absolutely fabulous book, which begins so crazily. It's got the craziest opening of any book. And yet, by the end of it, it all somehow makes sense. And if you can find that, I think he wrote it in the 50s. Have you looked up Margaret Ellis? Anybody? Has she come up?
Yes, yeah. Margaret Ellis Miller,
That's
American-Canadian mystery and suspense writer.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Hey, listen, we could, make sure that we'll put these in the comments so that, because, we should make this available for all to check out. So maybe we could put those up there. So many references, of course, naturally, to Agatha Christie. Kim McGee wants to know, how many Agatha Christie books do you have on your full bookshelf behind you? That's a good question from Kim McGee.
I'm afraid to say the answer to that question is zero, not a single one. And the reason for that is that the books that are behind me, on that side of me, which is my left and probably your right, are all my reference books that I use for my writing, the most important reference books. And I'm afraid to say that the other ones all the way that way are all by me. So this is sort of, because this is my office, so those are all me in different languages, and just that's what it is. Yeah. But downstairs, on the other hand, on my sort of beloved bookshelves in my living room, I think you'll probably find about, well, certainly 40 Agatha Christie's and maybe more.
So great. Chris Laney, you want to take a look at some of the questions? Well, let me ask one more as long as we're on the subject. Barbara Ringle wants to know, how do you feel being referred by some as the new Agatha Christie? How does that feel to you?
Well, Barbara, thank you for that lovely question. I hope you're keeping well and safe. I won't say no to being compared to the greatest crime writer who ever lived. Thank you very much. I admire her very much, and I would never make a comparison myself between me and her. But let me just say that when I'm writing my books, I try very hard to be as good as her, and to be as original as her, to be as surprising as her. That's the most important thing for me, that when you get to the end of one of my books, you know, the great thing about Agatha Christie, you get to the end of an Agatha Christie, you either guess it or you don't guess it. If you don't guess it, you still feel you should have guessed it, because all the clues are there in plain sight and it all makes sense, and you don't feel she's cheated you. She hasn't held back any information. Even in a book like The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which pulls one of the most famous tricks in the world on the reader, everything is actually there in front of you. I know, I've read it a few times to see how it works. So that's it. So you either guess it, or if you do guess it, it doesn't feel disappointing either. You feel, wow, I'm as clever as Agatha Christie. I actually got it right for a change. So it's a win-win situation for the reader and for the writer in that sort of thing. And I've always loved her books and admire her for her. You know, I didn't love all her books equally, incidentally. I've never been a huge Miss Marple fan, I'll be honest. And Tommy and Tuppence leave me a bit cold. But, you know, the Poirots and the great, you know, she wrote 83 books, I think. And to, you know, to have on your, just to have, you know, Death on the Nile, Cards on the Table, one of my very favorite Agathas, Orient Express, Roger Ackroyd, Taken at the Flood, Mirror cracked from side to side. Look at the mirror cracked from side to side. The motive for the murder in that book and the way she uses a Tennyson poem to illustrate it, it's just genius. It shows a complete understanding of humanity and the nature of murder. And it's fiendishly cunning and cleverly done. You know, so yeah, compare away. I'll be very happily compared as, no, not quite as good as, but trying.
Speaking of poetry, this is from the HarperCollins page. We have a question. It says, what place does poetry occupy in your writing space, or your, sorry, writing life?
I do read poetry. I read Philip Larkin a great deal, and Stevie Smith is a poet I'm very fond of, and Jackie D, I think her name is, Jackie K, wrong letter of the alphabet, who was the Scottish poet laureate. I like her work very much. I occasionally write poems myself. I wrote a poem the other day, curiously, about a lighthouse in Orford, on the coast of Suffolk, that had just fallen over due to global warming. And I wrote, to my surprise, I wrote a poem about that. I'm not very good at writing poetry. I find great poetry so far beyond my abilities that I can't pretend. The only poet whose work I have mimicked is the poet Hilaire Belloc. You know Belloc, Cautionary Tales?
Cautionary Tales.
You do know Cautionary Tales. Everybody knows Hilaire Belloc. And I write Cautionary Tales. I will quote my only and my favorite cautionary tale that I wrote in the style of Hilaire Belloc. And it goes as follows. I bought my aunt a winter cruise. No, that's not right. I'll start again. I bought Aunt Maud a winter cruise. And then I heard the dreadful news. She'd had a fatal heart attack. Too late to get my money back. That's a Hilaire Belloc. And that's about as good or as bad as it gets.
That's pretty damn good.
Thank you.
Welcome. That's wonderful. And I have to say that the remarks in the chat room about your heartfelt memories and devotion and to librarians is greatly appreciated. So
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yes. Let's see. We talked about the group. So lots of librarians are. Oh, Chris or Lainey? Because some people wanted to know. Did you put in the comments the authors that Anthony?
I'll type them in now. So we have Margaret Ellis.
Indeed.
And Barden. Who was that again?
John Franklin Barden. A book called The Deadly Percheron. Percheron. Here's a question for the panel. What is a percheron?
It's when you say it's a conversation that you have with a bird, and you say, "What perch you on?"
Very good. Yeah,
Thank you. I have no idea.
Very good. It is that. It is absolutely. But it has a secondary meaning, which is
okay.
a small horse.
A what?
A miniature horse.
Oh.
Really?
Yes.
That's good.
And
See?
talking about connections and reading and books, I'm reading at the moment a book by Charles Spencer called The White Ship. And he was talking about a district in France, La Perche it's called, where at the time of Henry I, a particular horse was bred and came to England at the time of Henry I, and that was the Percheron. In front of my eyes, and I never knew that a Percheron horse had come from France in the Middle Ages. And that's the joys of reading. You know, a complete surprise. Sorry, let's move on.
Well, Janet Lockhart, our good buddy down in North Carolina, she said, Percheron is a little horse. So yeah, you got librarians here.
You win, unless you hit that Google button.
No, librarians are, you know, Neil Gaiman paraphrase, but he says you don't need Google when they're librarians. They just know everything.
Right.
They know everything. But
they are Google. Let's be honest with you. Actually, Google is, when you hit the Google button on your screen, it just actually connects to librarians all over the world. They say, oh yeah, sure, you're looking at what a Percheron is. It's a little horse. Thank you.
It's totally true. I mean, they're better than Google. Come on. They're infallible. Lillian Dabney says, Anthony Horowitz, I want you to join my book discussion group.
Listen, I love book discussion groups. I mean, in my other detective series, the Word is Murder, My Sentence is Death, Hawthorne, my character, belongs to a book group. And I love book groups. I love the whole idea of them. I will not accept your kind offer because I very nearly forgot this one tonight or slept through it. I'm so unreliable. But if I say yes, I'll only let you down. But you know, what I'm looking forward to seriously is getting back on the road again. You know, I've done trips to America where we've had library dinners and library talks, and I've managed to meet people and talk books. And it's one of the great joys of life. You know, the literary festival, I miss them so much. Just, you know, can you think about it? The world is so rushed and tough and difficult and problematic. And yet, on a summer's evening, hundreds of people will turn out all over Great Britain to talk books, just to come into town. Riders, it fills me with hope, and I just can't wait to get back on the road.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. It's a strange.
Not use Zoom that's going to crash any second now. I keep waiting. I'm sitting here in desperate hypertension, waiting for the next crash.
Oh God. Kim McGee.
Every time you stop moving, Virginia, I think you've frozen. So you've got to keep moving.
Oh, all right.
That's it. Your image is still going. Thank
you.
All
right. So Kim McGee wants to know, would you ever want to write another version of your favorite Dickens book, A Tale of Two Quaint English Villages?
Oh, you just frozen and said on the last bit, your thing. A Tale of Two Cities.
No. A Tale of Two Quaint English Villages is what she wrote.
No, funny enough, I do have it in my head to write a Dickensian style novel. One day, if I'm spared, and not for about at least 5 or 10 years. I have this idea about doing a book set in Clerkenwell, which is in the area, I live in Clerkenwell, that's where I am right now. And it's a very old part of London. It's where Dickens actually lived for some of his time. And Fagin was also in this, lived around the corner from where I am now. And many of the characters from the books inhabited the streets here. And I would like to set a book in the 21st century, written in the style of Dickens. A sort of a big, fat blockbuster just about this area of London and all the people who live here, from the sort of the guy who sells the newspapers outside the station to the Eastern European girl who works in the dry cleaners to the writer up in his tower on the the top of his flat, to everybody, and how they interconnect and to find it's just a project I have in my mind, but not A Tale of Two Villages. No.
Okay. Now, Chris or Lainey, there's a cool question in here. They're all great questions. I'm loving them. I'm having a little bit of difficulty, but I think it's a Polly Ken question, and every time I get to it, my computer.
Oh yeah, I have it. Yeah,
okay.
I have it. So Polly Ken asks, what book would you suggest to get someone started with mystery? Something that will hook them and give them a good understanding of the genre.
Well, that's an interesting one, a sort of an early primer in mysteries. But I'm not. You're librarians. That's one of you three should go to answer that one better than me. I'm trying to think to myself, would I go back to Doyle? No, probably not. I mean, I start at what age? For a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old?
Yeah.
not sure that anybody's written sort of murder mystery for that age. I'm thinking Sophie Hannah maybe, you stumped me on that one. Come on, team. You ask a librarian. I'm asking three of you.
Well, we're not librarians. We just bow to the altar of librarians. So librarians watching, you can...
Somebody have to post something. I can't think of many books in that. I know that I was asked once if I'd be interested to write a murder mystery series for young people. And my answer was I didn't think young people were that interested in the sort of the games, the puzzles, the clues, the suspects, and all the rest of it. And that it wouldn't work. So I said no to it. And the question reminds me that one of the things I think is that I'm not sure that there are. So I'm going to duck the question and say go to Sherlock Holmes. Go to the original Sherlock Holmes short stories. You can't go wrong with them. I read them when I was 17. They got me into murder mystery. So start there.
And you know what, Chris? If you want to read the question one more time, and librarians, if you're all still here. So if you have a thought to add to Anthony Horowitz's suggestion of Sherlock Holmes short stories, put them on here. And I think it's a really cool, cool launching point for another discussion. And I think could be helpful to librarians if they, want to.
I mean, are the Hardy Boys detectives?
They are.
They're old fashioned now, aren't they? They're a bit sort of. No, I can't think.
I have a little 9-year-old neighbor, and I gave her a set of Encyclopedia Browns. Do you remember those?
Oh, yeah. And
she loves them because they're just sort of like, you have to pay attention. I mean, I know it's different, but she's also 9. And so, it's kind of, it's just, get those little wheels turning in a different way. Anyway, my 2 cents. Anthony, it's almost 3 o'clock. And we've managed to stay connected.
Not too bad, actually, all things said and done.
Not too bad. Anthony, as we near the end of our, yes, people are writing. Marianne Casel-Burke says, Woman in White is too dated, I think. Many of us started with Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, then to Doyle and Christie. So they're already starting.
Well, I got some. I mentioned the Hardy Boys. I think Woman in White is too complicated. It's a wonderful book, Wilkie Collins. I actually love it. And The Moonstone as well is a terrific
that is
with a great detective in it as well.
Yep. William Dabney said The Moonstone. This is a great discussion. Yeah, this is really cool. But I want to leave just a minute or 3. Is there anything else that Chris, Lainey, you want to say to Anthony before we have a little reading?
A question has been burning on my mind because on your website, I heard that you got a human skull for your 13th birthday, and I need to know that story.
I get it.
He's storming out, Lane.
No, I'm not answering that.
Yeah, I am. Here he is. There's a human skull. And it sits beside my desk. And I got this originally because I was just interested in what happens inside here. I was interested in the head and in the brain. And I wanted to just examine what's inside the brain, really. That bit. And now it sits there to remind me to work harder, to keep going faster, not to waste time, because quite soon, that's what I'm going to look like, the same. So it's a sort of memento mori. It's a thing to just keep working, keep writing. And incidentally, I know I've been playing with it now in fun, but actually I do respect this very much. This is a human being. This is once a person, and I keep it to one side on a shelf, and I am very respectful of it. So forgive if I've offended anybody by larking around a bit. It's because you 3 have excited me, and we're having fun. But actually, I never forget that this was once somebody who walked this planet. I'm going to put it back on its place.
Wow, I just had to ask. I needed to know.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
There it is.
Yeah, and I can tell you that your true colors are just, you are just so lovely and kind and warm. And
you're very kind to say so. Thank you. I think that we've all got to learn to be kinder. That's for sure.
Yeah, I know. Well, this has been a lovely hour, honestly, and we're so happy. Congratulations. What's that?
Well, thank you so much. Today is the day that Moonflower Murders is published in America, so it's quite a big day for me.
Today, your on sale date. So happy book birthday. I don't believe I mentioned that in the very beginning.
So, finds the book and likes it.
I'm sorry?
Oops, I've lost you. Have I lost everybody? Am I still here?
Yeah, you're here. We're moving. Can you see us? Can you hear us?
Oh, we're collapsing again. Hold on.
We are collapsing.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Maybe we're collapsing too much for a read. I don't know. What do you think? I'm afraid. Do you want to give it a shot, or we'll just tell people, go and read this beautiful book?
You will have. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Anthony, Chris,
Yeah.
Lainey, librarians. How much fun was this? We were so looking forward to this hour, and it's been great.
Yeah, people are so appreciative of this. I think
well,
just
I
what they
want
needed.
to just thank you very much again. Apologies for my rudeness in falling asleep, but it's been a pleasure talking to the three of you, and also to the other librarians who have, to the librarians, not the other librarians, to the librarians who have joined in too. And wish you just all happiness and health, and you know, and let's get to the end of this year and start the next one running.
Here, here, absolutely. We say the same to you. We wish you and yours well, and you know, the light's coming out. We think, as you say, we've maybe have turned a little corner here.
I really hope so.
Yeah.
On which note?
On which note, we say goodbye, and we thank you, and we congratulate you on this beautiful book, this fabulous book, your book within a book. Library Reads Hall of Famer and all around wonderful man. You be well.
Very kind. Thank you, and thank you, Chris. Thank you, Lainey. Keep well.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Face to face next time without technology.
Absolutely. Yes.
Looking forward to it.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Anthony.
What a good man. Bye. Are we still on?
We're still on.
Hey, you guys. Wasn't that cool? Oh, my God.
Amazing.
Oh, shoot. We forgot to talk about the puzzles.
We still have time. We can show
Lainey, tell them about the puzzles.
So not only is the book a puzzler, but we also have puzzles that were made for the book, and we are giving some away. So just let us know, and we'll be giving those away. But look how cool this is. And I don't know if there's it's just another book, but yeah, so you can put an actual puzzle together while you're doing a mind puzzle.
I love that. It's so cool. Yeah, just let us know, and thanks for your questions, and we'll send a copy of the book to you. And I'm sure many of you have read it, but if you haven't, you'll see what all the fuss is about. And if you haven't read them before, well, get going, because not a Library Reads Hall of Famer for nothing. Man, he's so smart. God, he can just rattle off. It's amazing. So cool. Thank you all. We so appreciate you joining us for the conversation. And yeah, just shoot us an email. Tell us where to send the book and or the puzzle, and we will hook you up. So I guess that's it for now, huh? Anything else?
That's it for us.
Anything? It's been a beautiful day. It's a new dawn for some. And I don't know. Time will tell. But I agree with Anthony. We've turned a corner. Let's hope. But this was a lovely, lovely, what did he say? The great escape. These are great escapes. Books are great escapes. And so are authors like Anthony Horowitz. Just a lovely man. And great storyteller. So, all right, everyone. You be well. And I think we need to be giving everyone a big kiss goodbye. Mwah!
Bye-bye, everyone.
Well.